Pipes no good today. Not neat day. Little. Morning. Morning, folks. Morning, Barbara. Morning, Lenny. Janine. Or the Janie. Alistair. Morning, Mr. Milligan. Morning, Nick. Morning, Grace. Morning, Iris. Morning, Arthur. Morning, Alistair. Morning, Dougie. Stephen. Mags. Jim. Nearly there. Shazza. Pete. Lynn. Who knows? Michael. Alan. And Margaret. Morning, Austin. Morning, Rosie. Marlene, good morning. Mags. Alan, nearly there. Morning, Elizabeth. How's Duisburg this morning? Tommy, you just made it number 100. Well done, Tommy. Let's get this broadcast underway. It's Indytruck, Davy and the truck. Coming to you today from Hillington, roughly. Sort of between the Southern General and Hillington. Wee snack bar here, so stop for a bite to eat. Anyway, it's not a bad morning. Quite nice. And it's 13 degrees. Sun's out. Not bad for this time of year. So that's the weather forecast for, I don't know if they still call this, Governor, whether it be Bray Heed. But anyway, that's the weather forecast for this side of Glasgow. Alright. If you want to know what the weather's like where you are, look out the bloody window. Okay, let's get underway. Here's the latest COVID figures. Right, on Wednesday there was 3,194 new cases. And from Tuesday to Wednesday, 1,529 people are in the hospital, of which 25 are in the intensive care. There were 27 deaths registered from Tuesday to Wednesday, where COVID was a contributing factor in the deaths. So that's the latest update. Okay. Right, moving on. Wednesday started with a mixed bag in the rags. The two standout stories were the P&O ferry saga. Well, P&O saga, sorry, the ferry was a different matter. Ferry was was adrift in the Irish Sea. And Sunak under pressure from Cabinet to cut taxes. Alright, on the ferry adrift at sea. They managed to get the thing up and running again, and it was escorted back to the port of Larne, where it's pounded until it's inspected by the maritime authorities, before it will be allowed back into service. So that's another boat out of the service doing that road, but I dare say down there at Cairnryan, they're getting used to having only half a service. Okay, on Cabinet pressure on Sunak to cut taxes. A Which survey out showed that 59% of people have changed their lifestyles to tackle the cost of living crisis. So the economy is going into contraction at a rapid rate of knots. Alright, Police and Crime Minister down that road, Kit Malthouse, he tells Sunak to cut taxes because that's the way to revive the economy. Put more money into people's pockets so that people can go out and spend it into the economy. That's what Davy's been saying about wee Mrs. McGlumpher. In fact, it's what Starmer said at Prime Ministers yesterday and all. If people have no money in their pocket, economy contracts. See, told yous it wasn't rocket science. If two of these spanners down there in Westminster can understand it, it's definitely no bloody rocket science. Okay, moving on. Wednesday, Scottish Government ordered by the Information Commissioner to publish their legal advice on Indytruck 2. Constitutional Secretary Angus Robertson says it's unusual for the government to publish its legal advice because of a client confidentiality, right? Now, the Information Commissioner says in this case it's in the public interest that some of the information, be very clear about this, some of the information is published. It is to be published by the 10th of June. It will be interesting to see what the legal advice says. I'll tell you, legal advice better well say. Otherwise, we've got a corrupt legal system here. It better well say it's up to the people of Scotland, as sovereign people have a right to determine their own future. And as we all know, even Westminster recognises that the people of Scotland are sovereign. So the only legal advice that could be is that, if you want to hold your referendum, go ahead. There's nothing anybody can do about it. Now, as we know, in order to get the second bit of legislation to determine what type of referendum this is on the table and passed, it only needs the signature of the Lord Advocate, Dorothy. Christ, I forgot her second name now. Anyway, it only needs a Lord Advocate here in Scotland's signature. Is it Dorothy Bairn? I think it is. Anyway, so the legal advice better will say that go ahead, have your referendum. Right, moving on, Wednesday. It comes to light that in a brainstorming session in Downing Street to try and tackle the cost of living crisis, Transport Minister Grant Sharp suggests changing the rules on MOTs for vehicles from every year to every 2 years. And there's a Davy says here, are you mental? Wow, it's bad enough they're killing people by kidding on the pandemic doesn't exist anymore. But actually, biannual MOT checks. Woof, my job's hard enough with nutters in the road, never mind bangers to go along with it. Wow, absolutely nuts. Just another way to kill off as many people as you can. Oh, it's alright, kids, just take your motor on the road, doesn't matter what state it's in. Right, moving on. Wednesday in Scotland, branch office of London Labour comes under fire for making campaign leaflets, for producing campaign leaflets in which SLAB, Scottish Labour, claim the cost of living crisis in England and Wales is down to the Tories, but in Scotland, the cost of living crisis is down to the SNP. Now, I had a bit of a rant yesterday about the Alba Party deceiving people, and I get pelters about the councils are holding great reserves. Here a wee news flash for you Alba Party members. And remember, I've not got a problem with Alba Party. I've only got a problem with this lying manifesto. You know, there's legislation which says what council reserves can and can't be spent on. And the cost of living crisis isn't part of it. So, if the council reserves are to be dipped into, Alba Party would need to be in central government to pass a law to allow the council to use the bloody reserves. Wow. Anyway, back to the Labour Party and these bloody lying leaflets have been putting through people's doors. Poverty Pie Sarwar's got a cheek, as we all know, because he's part of the problem. But the disastrous economic conditions we find ourselves in is all down to Sarwar's imperial masters in London. Because all the microeconomic levers used to control the economy and adjust the economy lie in Westminster except one. And that's income tax. And there's very little you can do with income tax in the middle of a bloody cost of living crisis. So, Sarwar claiming that the SNP were responsible for the cost of living crisis here in Scotland is another out and out lie. But as I said yesterday, you expect that for the cuckoos in the nest. Don't expect us to lie to ourselves. Wow. Anyway, moving on. Wednesday, in Aberdeen City Council, a Labour-Tory coalition are slated for cancelling the much-trumpeted opening of the Union Terrace Gardens. The opening is abandoned because the site is still a big, muddy hole in the ground. Right. Now, the council say the problem is a lack of building materials to finish the project. Ah, well, you can blame the Tory and Labour Council coalition, by the way, up there in Aberdeen, an official coalition, can lay the blame for that at their imperial masters' doors and all. Because the reason why we've got a lack of building materials and why building materials are so bloody expensive is Brexit. A lot of these materials came from Europe, and European companies have just said to themselves, there's another 450 million people here in Europe to deal with. Let's forget the 65 million in the UK. It's just no worth the bloody hassle. So Union Terrace Gardens in Aberdeen's no complete, and God knows when it will be, because they can't get the building materials they require. Alright, moving on. Wednesday, Baroness Helena Kennedy QC delivers her report to the Scottish Parliament into misogyny in Scotland. The QC tells MSPs that the tales she had been told while speaking to women's groups were horrendous. She also tells MSPs that social media had contributed to the rise of misogynistic behaviour on the street. She says there's spillover for the social media into real life. And that might well be true, because I've just seen a picture of mine, a picture of a friend of mine who's had their eye punched on at a bus stop by some geezer. Unbelievable. Anyway, Baroness Kennedy advises MSPs that new laws should be introduced to curb the behaviour. In other words, men can't behave themselves, so it's time to introduce laws to make them bloody well behave themselves. I don't think the problem's quite as bad as what we're being told, but saying that, I move in a circle of decent people. That's you lot. So it could well be that Baroness Helena Kennedy is right. Maybe that is time to introduce some laws to put an end to some of this behaviour. Alright. Right, moving on. Wednesday, here in Scotland, and Dross is interviewed and asked if the shite show in Westminster will see the Tories take a drubbing in the council elections. Dross says he's confident the Tories will be the second biggest party in the council elections, and he reiterates his support for Bojo, the clown, claiming that to change a PM now in the middle of the Ukraine crisis would bring chaos. Nobody's buying that piss right enough. Now, will the Tories still be the third biggest party in the councils after this election? Do you know there's every possibility, because let's face it, Sarwar's no any better than Dross. They're both a pair of clowns and nobody really has any time or respect for either of them. Okay, right, moving on. Wednesday, lunchtime rolls round, and down that road, Prime Minister's questions are on. First up is Starmer, and he went on the cost of living crisis. Well, he didn't, he actually started on misogyny. But you know what Bojo is, he just shrugs up and half agrees, and then we move on to the cost of living crisis. Alright, now, Starmer asked Bojo if cutting taxes in the middle of cost of living crisis is a good idea. Bojo come away with his usual bombastic pish about the fastest growing, that they've cut taxes via NI for X amount of people, and the fastest growing economy in the G7. Starmer then points out to him, actually, we've got the second worst economy in the G7. We're right above Russia. And let's face it, Russia's been sanctioned left, right and centre, and its economy's on its arse. And we're one above it. Anyway, Bojo boasts that our economy by 2024 will be the fastest growing in the G7 again. He doesn't seem to understand economics, Bojo. We've just spoke about it. We Mrs McGlumpher's no money, then the economy stalls. And Bojo's and his Chancellor and that shower of crap down that road are actually making sure we Mrs McGlumpher's no money. So the economy's going to continue to contract. I would throw in Brexit and all just for good measure, because let's face it, I'm not a BBC, I'm allowed to say Brexit. Alright, okay, so Bojo was back to his usual bombastic self. No contrition in the man at all. And still telling lies and talking pish, talking about employment being back to where it was post-pandemic. Well, if you go into YouTube and Peter Stevanovich's site, I think it actually might be in my timeline, he breaks down the numbers. And Bojo's lying through his teeth. We're still 500,000 jobs short of what we were prior to the pandemic. Okay, the next up was Blackford, and he went on kids and food banks. Alright, Mr. Blackford said 830,000 food parcels had been given out by the Trussell Trust to children. Blackford told them about the child tax payment here in Scotland and encouraged Bojo to get ahead, put back the 20 quid in the universal credit, and David Scotland's then and give an extra 20 quid, an extra £1,440 a year to families with children. Anyway, Bojo being Bojo, he blusters a bit and then tries to take the credit for the Scottish Government's policy on child payments. What Bojo says is the reason the Scottish Government can do it is because of the broad shoulders of the UK Exchequer, or Treasury. Well, you know, if that Treasury's got that big wide shoulders and it's giving all this extra money to Scotland so that the Scottish Government can do these things, which we know is bollocks, of course, then why doesn't he do it in England? Because that would just imply, he didn't realise what he did yesterday. In front of the people of England, He boasted that they were giving extra money to Scotland and that he was starving the people of England deliberately. Well, Bojo is an idiot. What an idiot. Standing there saying, yeah, Scotland, you're doing that because we're giving you extra money. But a political choice here to starve the children. A political choice here to make people poorer. Wow. And he thinks that's a good look. And he thought he was being funny. What a spanner. Huh? Right, there was another couple of things come up in the Prime Minister's questions. Sir Geoffrey Donaldson, at the DUP, he quizzes Bojo or NI protocol. Bojo just waffles and laughs his arse off him. You know, this legislation is supposed to come through to allow ministers to break the withdrawal agreement and the NI protocols. It's all waffle. You know, and the other one, as I say, was misogyny. And while we're there, it came to light that a Tory MP was watching porn in the chamber in the House of Thieves and Carpetbaggers, and apparently he was sitting next to a female MP at the time. Wow, talk about bad taste. And just to ensure that there's balance down that road, an MP claims that a shadow minister said to her that there's a reason why she wins votes. Apparently she's a good-looking lassie, but they didn't want to name her. Apparently all women want to be her friend because she's a good-looking lassie, and all men want to have relations with her because she's a good lassie. Now, apparently the MP actually used the F word when he was talking to her, but, you know, it's before the watershed, so Davy will only swear a couple of times during this programme. But it isn't funny. We've just had Baroness Helena Kennedy talk about it here in Scotland and say maybe it's time to introduce laws, and the House of Thieves and Carpetbaggers is rife with this stuff. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Right, where are we for time? What's the time, Davy? Oh, time's pressing on. Anyway, let's move on. Moving on, Wednesday, down that road, and the High Court in England rules that moving people into care homes at the start of the pandemic without testing was unlawful. So much for Hancock's protective ring around care homes, eh? Anyway, the upshot of it is, up here in Scotland, they're speculating if there would be a similar judgment in the Scottish courts. I don't know, but what I do know is that it would appear that the High Court down that road hasn't taken everything into consideration. You know, yep, they did know that there was a possibility of asymptomatic carriers because we'd known about China. They really did. But the testing regime here wasn't up and running. It really wasn't up and running. And in the case of Scotland, there was very, very little COVID in the care homes, as I've explained. I've even went over the couple of the few reports that have been done, which suggests that actually, because there was no testing of care home staff, as well as people being transferred, then the most likely route into care homes was staff, as the COVID started to spread. But will the Scottish Court come up with the same answer? I don't know. We have a different legal system, different criteria on what this sort of thing would be judged on. But anyway, the speculation is there'll be legal challenges here in Scotland, and people will be looking for compensation, apparently. So you can expect things to get worse with the public services as people who have lost loved ones claim millions off the government. I've never quite understood this suing the government thing. I mean, my own wife could have sued them a couple of times for medical errors. One that left her with a big bloody hole under here and had her in intensive care for 3 days just to get a tooth out. But we didn't sue them. What would be the point? It would be taking the money out the public purse and some other poor bugger wouldn't get the treatment they need. I know people are hurting. I know people have lost loved ones. Yes, mistakes were made. But, hey, listen, we've all lost loved ones through this. You know I have as well. But taking money out of children's schools and nurseries and social services and home helps and things like that because you're suing the government for your particular grief. I mean, technically me and my brothers could sue them. My father went into hospital with nothing really wrong with him and come out dead because he caught it in hospital. That's a government-run institution. I could sue the bloody hospital, I suppose. But I wouldn't take the money out of the public purse. There would be no point it would just mean there'd be no free nursery care for some poor nipper that needs it. There would be no free school meal for some poor nipper that needs it. There would be no home care for friends and family that need it. Suing the public purse isn't the answer. Attributing guilt, fair enough. Recognising mistakes were made, fair enough. But suing the public purse, come on, people. All we're doing is depriving our own children, of services if we take the money out of the system. Alright, so that's Davy's tuppence worth on that one. Right, moving on. And down that road there's more trouble, isn't there? Passport offices are in meltdown. There are a million people trying to get passports after the 2 years of lockdown when nobody really gone anywhere. Anyway, and half the passport office staff are still working from home. So, the fast track websites collapsed, the whole lot, the system's in bloody meltdown. And Bojo's demanding that the head of the passport agency gets back to work, because apparently she's working from home or he's working from home and all. But you know, this is what you call progress for you kids. A lot of the audience here will be my age or older. So you remember back in the day when we needed an emergency passport or we needed a temporary passport, we went down to the post office, got our picture taken, and because the postmaster knew who you were, because it was your local postmaster, out came the wee brown thing with the coat of arms on the front of it, temporary passport, picture glued into it, postmaster would sign it, stamp it, and you had a passport for a year. See, when you do away with these services, that's when you get into trouble like this. It was dead straightforward when I was a kid. You needed a 1 year passport, temporary passport, run the post office, job, fill the forms out, picture, jobbed. So sometimes progress isn't the right thing, you know. So apparently there's a million gamins wanting to be on holiday. Enjoy yourselves. Davy's not going anywhere to get a Scottish passport. So Davy might not be leaving at all. Mental. I suppose I could apply for an Irish one. Right, or a German one. Right, moving on. Wednesday evening rolls in, and Liz Truss gives a speech on the Ukraine. You know, and she tells Western leaders that the Ukraine, we need to defeat Russia, apparently. And Liz does everything just short of declaring war on Russia. In fact, I think at one point she did say we were at war with Russia, but I don't think that counts as a declaration, you know what I mean? Anyway, she's demanding that they send aeroplanes, heavy armament, the lot. She's demanding that Russia is pushed out of the whole of Ukraine, and that includes the Donbass, Luhansk, and the Crimea. Anyway, a bit of tub thumping there for Liz Truss. Absolutely hilarious stuff. And as I say, then we have the defence analysts on, and they're talking about aircrafts for Ukraine, and the defence analyst says that's easy for Liz Truss to say. No, you need to send them aeroplanes. None of your equipment when it comes to aeroplanes is any good to the Ukrainians, because they were not taught to fly in Russian machines. So Liz Truss can promise them airplanes if she wants, but she better spend a couple of years training pilots, because they can't do in. Anyway, she tells the military-industrial complex to ramp it up and start pumping out weapons to go to Ukraine. But here's the interesting part about that, kids. The military-industrial complex don't work for nothing. Materials, workforce, premises, assembly lines, no cheap. And they don't give their stuff away. So that means that magic money tree can be shaken to by the vast military-industrial complex, but it can't be shaken to feed the hungry kids we've just been speaking about. No disrespect to the people of Ukraine. Yes, we have to give them aid. Yep, we've got to assist them any way we can. Putin's war is an aggressive move, and if he's not stopped, he could continue to roll right across other previous Soviet states. But if you can shake that managed money tree for the vast military-industrial complex to get paid, then you can shake it twice and feed kids. Remember, folks, we don't really have what they call a debt or a deficit or whatever they want to call it, because 96% of that we owe ourselves. It's just numbers on a ledger. We can write it bloody off. Okay, so Truss was sub-tumping last night, demanding that the West supply Ukraine with oodles and oodles and oodles of weapons so that they can shove Russia out the door. But that's not what will happen. If it looks as if the Ukrainians are getting the upper hand in this conflict, Putin will just fire in what they call a localised nuke and take a city out. You know? But let's move on and have a wee look at what's been going on in Ukraine. Alright, so let's move on to Ukraine. UN Chief Antonio Guterres is in the region. First, he visits Putin. Now, Putin tells Guterres that his troops are in Ukraine to protect the rights of the people in the two areas that he recognises as people's republics and sovereign states, that he's there to protect their sovereign right to self-determination. Putin's no daft. He ties Guterres up in UN legislation. You know? And what he's actually doing is setting up a situation where these two areas in the southeast of the Ukraine, which he recognises as a sovereign states, the Luhansk and Donbass regions, and the Crimea, it looks like somewhere along the line there's going to be referendums in these places so that they can make their mind up, you know. But what's interesting about what he was saying about that is, because let's face it, the UN's been telling us that we have the right to our self-determination, and that if Westminster won't give us a Section 30 order, then the UN have told us we can hold a referendum under international law and it will be accepted internationally. So Putin's no daft. He's tying them up in their own knots. Anyway, Guterres is off to visit President Zelensky. He'll be meeting with him today, and in his pocket, Guterres has got a promise from Putin that he will allow those in the Aztal a metal plant, steelworks, and a Mariupol to leave. What's no clear is whether he means just civilians or whether he means the troops can leave as well. That's something they're going to have to work out. Alright, but Putin also warns Western nations of a swift retaliation if Western nations intervene in his war in the Ukraine. And to prove a point, he cuts off the gas supply to Poland and Bulgaria, under the guise that they won't pay for gas in rubles, although the contracts were signed for them to be paid in dollars or euros. Alright, now this brings a response from the EU27 and EU President Ursula von der Leyen. The EU President says Russia's attempt to use fossil fuels to blackmail European states won't work. She then warns European nations to stand strong and not to pay in rubles for fossil fuels, or they will be in breach of the strict sanction regime agreed by the EU27. Alright, so Putin's no playing about. He's starting to get desperate. He's running out of cards. And when you're backed into a corner the way he is, his economy's in meltdown. Well, just a wee bit behind the UK. Brilliant, Bojo. Fastest growing in the G7. Starmer. No, it's not. We're the second worst economy in the G7. One above Russia. Anyway, Putin's getting desperate. The economy's in meltdown. Eventually his people are going to turn on him. And that is, of course, a plan. That is a plan. Sit it out until Putin's people turn on them. But of course, the idiot defence secretaries, you know, the American idiot, when he was in Poland the other day there, turned around and said that they want to weaken Russia to the point where they can't do these, can't invade anybody else. And Putin can wave that in front of the Russian people and get himself a wee bit longer before they turn on him. Okay. Anyway, So that's the situation in Europe and in the Ukraine at the moment. Still battles up and down the front line as well, which is 300 odd mile long. So there you have it. Okay, time's battering on, folks, so let's move on to this morning what the papers have to say. Okay, mixed bag in the rags today. The Herald says, Scots families of COVID victims in legal threat after court ruling. Go ahead. Don't see what there is to gain out of it except for depriving your children of their future as you draw money for a public purse. Well, we're all grieving during this. Taking money out of the public purse is not the answer. The eye has. Floodgate will open to more cases after care home ruling. That probably will do in England. Especially as the cost of living crisis gets deeper and deeper. And people will be desperate for money. Right. The Metro has. Porn MP exposed. That's a bright choice of words, that, isn't it? Porn MP exposed. Oh, dearie, dearie. The loony right-wing rag, the Express, goes on. Tory MP caught watching porn in Commons. Now, the Times has... Truss fears Ukraine war could carry on for years. It could. It could, provided Putin's got the money, the armament, and his soldiers have got the will. Alright, the Record goes on. Crisis in the surgery. Now, apparently, GPs are overworked, stressed, and thinking about chucking it. Right, the Scotsman has revealed evidence that reveal advice that told of 586 million Lochaber deals risk. Now, apparently, the state aid given to the aluminium smelter at Lochaber, they say it might have broke state aid rules. But the question is, what state aid rules? State aid rules were imposed by and agreed by each nation in the EU 27. I don't remember any new legislation being passed in Westminster with rules on what the Scottish Government can and cannot give in state aid since 2016. If I'm wrong and somebody knows any better, stick a link in the comments. Right, the Telegraph has energy firms face threat of windfall tax. And apparently, Sunak's told them either invest in green energy and invest in energy infrastructure in the UK, or he's going to impose a windfall tax on them. Alright. The National has biggest council vote in history of devolution, and that is the First Minister telling people, get out and vote to you bloke, and lock the Tories out. So basically what the First Minister's saying is you're ranking down the candidates, right, say, in my case and where I am, it'd be SNP1, SNP2, SNP3, and then it'd be a choice of Labour, Tory. That's it. As far as I know, there's no Alpha Party candidate, there's no Green Party candidate, so I would only be ranking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'd be ranking the Tories at number 5. Alright, so yes, the First Minister's basically telling people, get out and vote, and lock the Tories out. Right, the Daily Fail has, is Sturgeon's referendum plan legal? We just spoke about that. We've already been told by the United Nations that if Westminster don't want to play, hold your referendum, it will be legal under international law. So as I say, if the Scottish courts say something different, then we have a corrupt legal system, because we the people in Scotland are sovereign. And Dorothy Bain just has to sign off on the legislation, and that's it. The best the Supreme Court could do is read it and say, aye, it's written correctly. Or no, it's not written correctly. Cross that T and dot that I, please. That's about it. Right. Anyway, we're back at we need England's permission, apparently, according to the Fail. And the Star has Wipeout. Boffins warn Bogrel threat to planet. You gotta love this Star, they're mental. Absolutely mental. Anyway, that's what I've got for you today. I hope you found it interesting. I hope you found it entertaining. Okay. Now, I know I'm having a pop at parties that are misleading people in this particular election. But that doesn't mean I don't want you to go out and vote for all pro-independence parties, even if you go to choke on it. List the pro-independence parties highest up the rankings. And that includes the Alpha Party. Even though their manifesto pledges are lies, then it doesn't matter. The more cuckoos in the nest we manage to get shorty, the better. So in these elections, rank all pro-independence parties, the SSP, Solidarity, whoever's running. Right? One, down to all the end of the independence parties, and then if you're going to list the cuckoos in the nest, list them last. Simple as that. Okay, when it comes to the question of Scottish independence, hey, partisan politics in your pockets and keep your eyes on the prize, get out there and win hearts and minds. Okay, support the independent media. Support Stephen Kelly with his YouTube channels. In fact, I've just seen his icon there. Support my mate David Milligan and his YouTube channel, the two Davies. And support Broadcasting Scotland, Independence Live, Caledon Media. You know the script. I've been talking about this for the last couple of years. If they've got a crowdfunder going and you've got a couple of shekels to spare, throw them in the pot. These people do good work. All right. Big Ian there. Hey, Ian, I hope you've been on to Alpha Party headquarters to ask them why your party is misleading the public. Anyway, it's nice to see you, Ian. We're still pals. Anyway, where was I? Aye. Face coverings in closed public spaces, clean hands and surfaces regularly. When it comes to social distancing, use your napper. Case numbers are up again over 3,000. Alright, just think to yourself, if I was positive, how would it affect the people around about me? And test. I know that free tests are finished, but if you still go to tests, submit your test results. If you can afford to, buy tests. Right, that's it for the day, folks. Just look after each other. Have a nice day. We'll be back tomorrow to do the last one for the week. Alright, bye now.